penitentiary years. If you have questions about the Fed years, let me know. I'm happy to answer them, but I generally talk about stuff that's not part of that audio tour that you're going to hit up at the top. Our first residents of Alcatraz, the Pelicans. So when this island was discovered in the 1700s, they named it Isla de las Alcatrazes, Island of the Pelican, or Island of Strange Bird. Seems fitting considering the people that ended up inhabiting this island in later years. Now, we were originally built as a military fort. We had discovered gold about 100 miles away. So we built this place as a military fort to protect potential invaders. We were expecting the British to come back and try and retake their land, what was our land now. So we built cannons all around this island. This island actually had over 100 cannons lining it. So these windows weren't actually windows. These were cannon casemates. You had cannons sticking out of those. Anything shooting this way or towards the Golden Gate Bridge, we didn't really worry about that way. So kind of from this side of the island around was all cannons. Anything brick that you see around the island today, and you do see it everywhere. You'll see it near the cell house. You'll see it going up the hill. This is all military era. This building was built in 1866. They knew how to build things back then to last. We haven't quite figured that out yet anymore. So after that, we became a military prison. So it's a military fort. By the time that fort was finished, it was considered mostly obsolete, wasn't really needed anymore. So it transitioned into a military prison. Civil War was just starting. We were housing soldiers who were caught drunk on duty, robbing other soldiers, rebel fighters. We were housing political prisoners. We didn't do POWs, but we did Native Americans. We did Confederate soldiers. So that guard housing was above the original cannon casemates. This military guard housing transitioned into the federal guard housing. Prison closes in 1963. Native American occupation, 1969 to 1971. A huge boost to their civil rights movement. That occupation started the Red Power movement that still goes on today. The only reason you have Native American reservations across this country today is because of this occupation that happened in 1969. And then, of course, last but not least, our Native American our National Park Service, Arrowhead. We've been a national park since 1972, given tours out here since 1973. They thought we'd only last about 5 years. It's been 50. People are still buying tickets today, as you can well see. But you've also got movie history out here. Come on in, folks, just a little bit. Dan's got to get that tram around you. So a little bit of movie history. This guard tower was refurbished. I think it was Escape from Alcatraz, but I'm not quite positive. But it was refurbished. The staircase itself, that rounded staircase, is not original. It actually had a straight up staircase. But those rounded staircases, those are actually made from original military prison staircases that were in the cell house. You'll actually see one of those today when you go in, right where you start your audio tour. The room on the left-hand side is the barber shop. It has one of those spiral staircases that goes up. So we did refurbish some of the stuff from the original prison. Guards lived here, but we're going to start heading up the hill in just a minute. I know most people come here because of Al Capone. Anyone heard of that guy? This is the dock that he landed at. We're going to go up the same path up the hill that he went up to get up to that cell house. We're going to head up right this way. It's actually the oldest building on the island. And I know that because there's a date sign. Alcatraz Island, 1857, one of the original spellings of Alcatraz. You can also see that brick behind it. Original military era fort. This was the drawbridge area. This portion of the building wasn't built until about 10 years later, once the fort was considered obsolete. Got the pulley system for the drawbridge up in the corners there. Drawbridge came down, went up as needed. So if anyone ever attacked the island, this drawbridge would be up. If they got past this drawbridge, you'd have soldiers in both rooms on either side behind these gun slits to protect. Further, if they got up to the top of the island, there was a citadel. And that citadel also had soldiers, and if they got into the dry moat around that original citadel, there were gun slits that they could shoot from there as well. Now, even though it wasn't originally built as a military prison, it was built as a military fort, it didn't stop us from incarcerating men here. The first 11 men on Alcatraz were incarcerated in this room right down below. And it probably doesn't look much different today than it did back then, except for a few more weeds and a door that probably wasn't there. These men would have been lowered down. They would have taken a ladder down, just a rope ladder, brought back up, treated for respiratory illnesses, sent back down. At one point, the doctor said, we need to get these people out of an area like this. We need to build an actual prison on this island. So they did. They built a bunch of prisons on this island. They built a bunch of different buildings that were seconded as prisons. We're going to head up just past this building, but please feel free to take a look in the rooms on the right and the left. The room on the right does have the a grate into the floor that you can actually see down into that original prison. There's not much there, but again, it probably looks a lot like it did back then. The room on the left does have a replica cannon, and then I'll meet y'all on the other side. Built throughout the whole area. The foundation of this building is actually the foundation of one of the first prisons here. This is where we held our political prisoners. This is where the Hopi Fathers would have been incarcerated. These men were brought to Alcatraz because they refused to give up their children for the American boarding schools. We were going to reservation and saying, hey, give us your kids, we're going to take them to the boarding schools, we're going to teach them the right way. We're going to teach them our culture, we're going to teach them our way of life, we're going to teach them our language. We're going to wipe out your culture, your way of life, your language, and we're going to separate you from your family. And these 19 men in Arizona were like, there's no kids here. You can't take my kids. I don't have any kids here. And so instead of that, the government decided to incarcerate the 19 Hopi Fathers out on Alcatraz. So they're brought out here for about a year. They're given some special treatment. They're taken into the city. They're taken to lunch at the mayor's house. They're taken around the city, shown a good time. This is what your kids are going to get if you give them up to those boarding schools. They still didn't want to give them up. A year later, those men are actually sent home. They never did give up their children. And luckily, they were able to continue their line. And this last Thanksgiving, we have sunrise ceremonies every Thanksgiving and Indigenous Peoples Day. This last Thanksgiving, the descendants of those original Hopi Fathers came out here to honor their fathers. So this is where they would have been incarcerated. One of the first wooden prisons for the actual military inmates would have actually been here, right above where I'm at. This was a wooden prison. At one point it did catch on fire, which caused a little PTSD for some of the men that were incarcerated in that building and couldn't get out. So every time someone lit a cigarette or every time someone burned something, these people got pretty freaked out. So these men were sent up to the top of the island to build the main cell house that you'll spend most of your time today, where the audio tour is. These military men that were incarcerated throughout the whole island in different prison buildings, wooden prison buildings, built that main cell house and then they moved into it. They did have a little bit more room. They had a little bit more privacy. They also had a sink and a toilet, a bed, a chair, and a desk, if you can call it that. But we're going to head up the hill just a little ways. But it was just a rock. So everything looked like this. No greenery, no plants, no flowers, definitely no beauty out here. It was just basically a rock that looked like a turtle's back. You didn't have any of the sheer cliffs that we have today. And it was covered in birds and bird guano. So it probably didn't smell very good either. So these military men and these Army Corps of Engineers came out and they basically chipped away at the rock bit by bit, creating these sheer cliffs, creating these roads that we have today. These roads are all prison labor. They're all built by prison labor. And they probably built some of these buildings. This building is the Officers Club. If you've seen the movie The Rock, anyone? Final scene in the movie, this building. Well, final scene with Sean Connery in it, I should say, is this building right here. Sean Connery actually ends up standing on the balcony on the other end at the very end of his final scene. But this building did burn down in 1970. Part of the Native American occupation that happened and started in 1969, the American government was doing a program called termination and relocation, terminating Native American reservations and relocating those Native Americans to big cities. So taking away their community, their culture, and just sticking them in big cities. Hey, you're going to have a bunch of support when you get there. You're going to have an Indian welcome center, something to support you. But these people would get to these big cities and they wouldn't actually have this support. So a group of college students in San Francisco were studying old treaties. And one of those old treaties said any unused government land was supposed to revert in ownership back to the Native Americans. We hadn't used this place in 6.5 years. It was sitting here, it was decaying, and we were trying to sell it. $2.5 million. Some guy named Lamar Hunt, the guy who created the Super Bowl, wanted to buy it, put a Space Needle out here. So a group of Native Americans, November 20th, 1969, calling themselves the Indians of all tribes, landed on Alcatraz to start their civil rights movement, their Red Power movement. There were a couple of historical things about this. For one, it started the Red Power movement. It was the first time multiple tribes got together to fight for the same thing. And it stopped the termination and relocation program. So they stopped doing that. So the only, like I said, the only reason we have reservations today is because of that. They had a lot of support. They had Marlon Brando. Ethel Kennedy came out to support them. They got a large cash donation from a band some of you may have heard of called Creedence Clearwater Revival, or CCR. They had generators donated. They had a lot of support from San Francisco and the surrounding areas. They had a ton of press. So it turned the tides from a lot of people being against the Native Americans to people supporting them. And unfortunately, these buildings changed that a little bit. So 4 buildings burned down in 1970. We don't know who did it. We will probably never know who did it. My only question is, why would the Native Americans burn down buildings that they were using? They were living in them. And it wasn't just the Native Americans that were out here at this time. You had the Hells Angels, you had the Black Panthers. It was a large hippie movement. We had a lot of those people out here. You had a lot of homeless people out here because they were selling tickets for $5 a pop to support their movement. So they would come out here, they would get a nice meal, they'd be able to stay for a couple days. They'd have a place to stay with a shelter. The thought is, for some people, I don't know how true this is either, is that they also had some people from the government who came out here and started these fires. I don't know who did it. It could have just been someone who was just against the movement and wanted to kind of sway things the other way. But they did get a little bit of what they wanted. The termination and relocation program stopped. They got a lot of press that did do them good. They started fighting for the same thing. They started fighting for the same options. And to this day, they still come out here. Sunrise ceremonies, Indigenous Peoples Day, and Thanksgiving. Eloy Martinez, one of the original occupiers, comes out here on a regular basis and gives tours for youth groups. These messages that you see around the island, they were painted almost immediately. When we redid the water tower in 2012, Eloy was out here with one of his youth groups, and he said, "What are you going to do with our message?" And the ranger at the time said, "We're going to repaint it. It's historical and it's important. We're going to repaint it." And Eloy kind of looks at him and says, "Who's going to repaint our message? Who's going to hold the paintbrush that paints our message?" So a little bit of back and forth between the National Park Service and the Indians of all tribes. And these messages have all been repainted by the Indians of all tribes and the descendants of those people and some Native American youth groups out of San Francisco. So we still have a good relationship with them, to work with them, and we're working on building a permanent exhibit down at the dock to show that occupation and what happened during that occupation. So we're going to head up the hill one more stop. If you have any questions, again, please let me know. There is one area that is only going to be open until 4:45, and that is the new Industries building, and that is going to be up this road. That is your call if you want to hang out with me or go up the hill. It's going to be open until 4:45. I'm only going for probably another 10-15 minutes, so we'll head right up this way. So this is the back end of the building that you saw down at the dock. The apartments, the guards, their families, their children, all lived out here on the island. The kids were ferried to and from school every day. They had like 12 round-trip ferries throughout the day, so the wives and the kids and the fathers could go out to San Francisco if they needed to on their day off, go shopping if the wives had to go to work. The children, again, to and from school. They loved it out here. They could bring their friends out here. On the weekends, they get, hey, you want to come out? We're going to have a dance in the officers club. Come on out. You know, little Johnny goes home to mom. Hey, mom, can I go out to Joey's house? Sure, where's Joey live? Alcatraz. You know, works out really well. They were probably the most popular kids in school, but they did form a community out here, and they absolutely loved it. Jolene Babiak still comes out, signs books. She was the associate warden's daughter in 1962. So she still loves coming out. I don't think that's a picture of her. That's one of the other kids that lived here, though. They'd roller skate up and down this pathway out into the playgrounds beyond. There are stories of, you know, the kids at one point, the warden didn't want them to have even fake guns on the island. So they had these little guns made out of popsicle sticks. And the warden's like, no, you got to throw all that away. You need to turn those in. So the trash truck coming down the hill, and the kids all throw their little popsicle stick guns in the back of the trash truck. And at the bottom of the hill, the inmate who was taking all those popsicle stick guns tossed them all back out to the kids. So, you know, they had some fun. They did have to turn those popsicle stick guns in again. They didn't get to keep them. But even military era, the guards and their families lived here. There's a story of one man who decided he didn't want to be imprisoned on the island anymore. His name was Virgil Tolliver. So in 1918, he breaks into one of these apartments, and he steals the wife's clothing. And he dresses in drag, he hops on a boat. They find the clothing over in his department store in San Francisco. They catch him about 4 months later in Sacramento. They had another gentleman who was breaking rocks. That was his job. And he went to his sergeant commander and he said, hey, I'm trained as a printer. Send me to the print shop. I'll be a lot more use there. So they do. And the first thing he does is he prints his discharge papers and a letter stating the government owed him some money for work performed. They actually walked him right down to that boat, escorted him onto the boat. They never saw him again. That happened 4 separate times. They couldn't figure it out. Another couple men decided they were going to get into a butter vat and swim to freedom. Butter vat is a barrel. That round shape doesn't work really well in tides like this. So they got out of the water and they do this, and they do this, and they do this, and they crash right back onto the island. So we had quite a few military escapes, some of them successful, some of them not so much. Some of them we don't know what happened to them. Obviously we have our federal year escapes as well. Most people know about the 62 escape. No clue, no idea. I don't know what happened to them. But they'll talk a little bit about that on the audio tour. You've got military era steps here. These were built in the 1890s. The sergeant commander at the time lived in one of the Victorian homes that was up there. And he didn't want to walk up this winding hill, so he had these stairs built. He had one caveat for these stairs. He also had corgis. Corgis have little legs. They're little stairs for little legs. That's the rumor. So we call these the puppy dog stairs. At this time, that is now Officers Row Gardens. They are closed to the public, but you can see them if you look over the railing on the top end. We've also got a couple other gardens. Up the hill, right before the water tower, if you look over the railing, you'll see the Rose Garden. They're not super in bloom right now, but they are slightly in bloom. And if you make sure you keep your eyes out, we've got great blue herons nesting in that eucalyptus tree. We have got black-crowned night herons nesting in these bushes here. And then if you hear some loud screeching, keep an eye out, because we also have a set of peregrine falcons that are nesting on the island, and they have 4 eggs that hopefully will hatch soon. Very excited about that. They had 4 eggs last year too. Couple things I recommend doing while you're here is obviously the audio tour. If you're not sure you want to do the audio tour, at least start it. You may find yourself super interested in it, or you may find yourself bored. You don't have to finish it, not a big deal, but at least try it. If you do the English-speaking one, it is in the former men's voices. So the former incarcerated men and the guards are the ones telling you their stories. To get to that, you're going to head up to the water tower and take a left. I also recommend heading out to the lighthouse area.